Thanks so much, and good evening, everyone. And it's a great privilege to be here. I would like to thank also my team joining me. I'm going to give you an overview about the Greater Kruger Landscape Conservation Initiative. And it's really about giving you an overview. What is the Greater Kruger landscape? Who are our partners? And we do have a lot of challenges, but tonight it is going to present the challenges, but the focus is about our partnerships and celebrating the partnerships because collectively we can do more. The Greater Kruger is embedded within the broader landscape initiative, the Great Limpopo Transfrontier Park and the Transfrontier Conservation Area, with a treaty that was signed between the heads of state in 2002 between Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and South Africa. Very important is that the grey shaded areas basically comprise conservation compatible land uses next to the core protected areas shown in green. And it is ultimately about including private, community owned and state managed areas into a broader conservation initiative, which is compatible with our wildlife management and economic development goals. If we look into the entire area, the Kruger National Park is more or less 2 million hectares. And if we look into the broader GLTFCA landscape, it's triple the size. If we look into the South African side and what we need to manage, it's basically 333 kilometers of state veterinary fence on the western boundary of the Kruger National Park, managed by State Veterinary Services. If we also look into the eastern boundary, the south and the north, we've got a total of 1,000 kilometers of fence line to be managed. On the western boundary, we've got 7 community forums through which we engage, but also 9 different traditional authority structures. We are straddled by 3 district municipalities, Vembe, Mupani, and Elanzeni, and 9 local municipalities. We are also part of 2 international UNESCO man biospheres, the Kruger-Tucanian biosphere and the Vembe biosphere. But the reality is we are bordered by poverty nodes with a very high unemployment in the area. Some of the global challenges that we are experiencing is the impact of floods. This is the recent flood earlier this year in some of the community areas next to the Kruger National Park. And this is also where our staff comes from. Very often it's also because the development has taken place in areas not zoned specifically for housing. This is some of the photos that shows the damage to our infrastructure to the left, the fence around the Kruger National Park being impacted. And obviously it's got an impact on the human-wildlife interface. The map to the right is in the Sabi River that flooded then the low water bridge here next to Skakuza. Although it's a natural event, it does impact also on the tourism and the livelihoods outside the Kruger National Park. Also, we are living in a changing environment. These photos show some of the changes next to the Kruger National Park. The fence between us and some of the community or the settlements, waste, especially what we call pampers, coming into the park through the river systems, but also impacting on the livelihoods. The fence is very often also used in materials for building or for whatever purposes. And once again, wildlife then gets into the community. And the photo to the right is one of the areas to the south of the Kruger National Park, where it's basically being used as a washing line. A very important question for the Kruger National Park and the management thereof is, how do we deal with this hard fence line? What is the incentive for communities? You've got livelihoods, poverty nodes on the one side of the fence and wildlife in the other side of the fence. And how do we create the custodianship? Unfortunately, we are dealing with governance concerns within certain community structures bordering the Kruger National Park, with the photo to the left showing some of the wildlife that has been illegally harvested in some of the state managed protected areas, posing a potential threat also to livelihoods, health. And then the photo to the right infrastructure that was damaged due to some of the community unrest within a state-managed area bordering the Kruger National Park. The next video is showing some of the protests then next to one of these provincial state-managed areas earlier this year. It therefore becomes critical to understand what is this changing environment bordering our protected area network. We are dealing with wildlife crime around certain species, not limited to our rhino, but there's also broader criminality within communities impacting on the well-being of communities and syndicates impacting especially on our youth networks. Waste being a major concern, very often the services from a local government level is not adequate. And then also water service delivery is a major concern for areas bordering the Kruger National Park. Sadly, also with the loss of iconic species or wildlife around rhino, we are losing further generations, this then being unborn calf, and key species like vultures, who's got a broader regional range, and the incident around poisoning is devastating on the role of vultures within the landscape. Once again, requiring critical partnership with community members and NGOs to collectively address this problem in a more holistic manner. We also experience a lot of protests around the protected area network. This is one of the roads on the Numbi area that was blocked by recent protests, and very often this is related to jobs, not expecting that the Kruger National Park need to supply, but just general jobs, concerns around service delivery, and actually asking Kruger National Park also to lobby at a political level for improved services, including water, schools, and health facilities. Considering that the human population is growing next to the Kruger National Park, it is very important to recognize that Kruger, irrespective of its size and the neighboring conservation areas, are embedded in a broader socio-ecological system. It is very important for us to understand what are these resources or ecosystem services that we are dependent on, and what are the different livelihoods, whether it's farming, whether it's communal settlements or protected areas downstream that use these resources, and how do we harmonize our practices and engage with each other. This photo was taken within Hoedspruit, then showing the Blyde Canyon area. Our partnerships within the Greater Kruger therefore joins hand to secure a Greater Kruger conservation economy that's inclusive, and join hands through ensuring environmental well-being, looking at the different ecosystem services, not only within the protected area footprint, but also the systems like the river systems flowing into the protected areas, and working collectively with partners around social well-being, looking into health, economic, and education partnerships. What is very important is that through these partnerships, we engage the process to look into champions, building improved communication and learning between partners. So for the Kruger National Park, why are we not only managing within the Kruger National Park? And that's something that came out during our consultation in 2017 and 18. People ask, only focus on your rhino and elephant, but we need to look into a broader landscape approach. So some of the consultation in 2017 and 18, through 54 workshops and interesting between local communities and metros, showed that local jobs not expected from the Kruger National Park was the most important, but the community communications was as important. And the feedback that we got was, why are we only communicating every 10 years when a management plan is being developed? How do we include the private sector and the investors in a fair and open process? How do we deal with damage causing animals? And once again, very interesting is that the inputs that we got from metros, cities, Cape Town, Johannesburg, focus on different issues. It was around tourism, the sense of place. For communities, it's a very different issue. It's about human wildlife conflict, dealing with livelihoods, What they experience is very different. And Kruger National Park needs to look into how do we manage for the international interests, our metros, and the livelihoods next to the Kruger. Out of that, we then develop what are the key issues that we will focus on. And the presentation is going to flag some of this in the partnerships. We recognize that we've got a flagship national park. It's known for the Big Five. It is also known for the big river systems and the tourism, but it is also known for the regional economic profile, which is critical in order to protect the Kruger National Park. And once again, if we try to deal with poaching in the Kruger National Park, if we try to deal with economic viability, our focus is not starting within the Kruger National Park, it's starting with the areas adjacent to the Kruger National Park. Our water resource management systems, we've got 19 different ecosystems in the Kruger National Park. It's managed for A or B category. It means that it needs to meet a certain quality for Mozambique downstream. We are managing Ramsar sites within our Makuleke contractual park, but we are also looking into managing water systems from the Kruger to Canyon biosphere, the Blyder systems, also through our Inkomati catchment entities. Once again, a lot of our tourists come and see the Big Five wildlife, and the big landscape is critical to maintain these populations. But these very same animals, iconic to some, are also the same animals that poses a threat to the wildlife for the livelihoods for communities next to the Kruger National Park. And the question is, do we manage it for the Kruger only, or do we start to manage it in a responsible way to look into the impacts for adjacent community areas? One of the key features also within the 2 million hectares of the Kruger National Park is our wilderness qualities, the sense of place, and the map to the left shows our zonation, the green blocks, the wilderness areas that's being managed for the sense of place. We do not have any tourist roads in the area, but on the western boundary outside the Kruger National Park, we do have developments. How do we start to protect and manage our relationships in those areas that it do not impact on the wilderness qualities and the populations, but also being fair in creating economic opportunities for communities that are living under poverty? In terms of our infrastructure management for the Kruger National Park, we've got well-developed infrastructure. It's recognized as one of our attributes. We've got 900 kilometers of roads, tar roads, 1,700 kilometers of gravel roads, and 2,500 kilometers of management roads. Yet only 0.63% of the Kruger National Park is currently under infrastructure. We've got more than 4,500 buildings. But looking into the current financial situation and what COVID did for tourism, this is one of our key concerns also in terms of financial sustainability, and we need to start to manage our practices different, also to look into green building infrastructure. Our tourism products coming to the communities are also then one of the opportunities where we are, through our concessions, looking into community partnerships through community public-private enterprises. The Shalati is the new train concession, and I'm very privileged to sit here tonight. And then some of our gate hub developments, because that forms the core for a spinal or infrastructure development, but with a focus on green energy and enterprise development for communities. Looking at the scale of what we need to sustain within the Kruger National Park, beyond our wildlife and what we manage inside the Kruger National Park, it does require a broader partnership approach for us to deal with 39 traditional authorities and a population of up to 3 million people only on the western boundary. And through this process, we were instructed by the Minister, Barbara Creasy, to develop a partnership program that starts to highlight on what we need to focus and what those opportunities might be. So since 2019, we developed a robust engagement process that starts to identify these priority areas that can sustain the Kruger National Park for the next 20, 30, 40 years. That's looking into a broader ecological management system. What is the rivers on the outside? What is the potential for wildlife expansion? But looking into the benefits not only for the Kruger National Park, but for diverse groups bordering the Kruger National Park, whilst also considering that we do have national and international stakeholders and everyone is important. The landscape is changing quickly. Some of our studies have shown that in Bushbuck Ridge, the landscape is growing the population 18% per year, and it's starting to quickly move towards the Kruger National Park. So we need to be able to inform what the responsible economic development is and what is the mutual safety and security. If we talk about rhino and elephant security, we need to start to think about security of livelihoods. Why is this partnership important and how do we build on this and initiatives that started in the 90s and 2000? It is about improving communication, the communication between the private sector, communities, NGO and funders, where best do we put our resources and align the integration of programs. Our interventions and the insight is not going to be effective if we do not focus on the right partners in a consistent manner on the outside and start to mobilize these resources. Also through increased rural economic activities that is meaningful and inclusive, especially for community areas that were previously excluded from the wildlife economy and the custodianship. Taking a landscape of 6 million hectares is huge to make it operational and practical. We use the stratification process and a major team work on this, also building on efforts of our UNESCO Man Biosphere. To identify what is of strategic interest at the international level, what are the biodiversity conservation goals inside the Kruger National Park, our neighboring conservation areas, the river systems, overlaid with the economic goals, not only of the protected area network, but the adjacent land uses that's dependent for tourism purposes and enterprise development on the protected area network. Our safety and security programs, once again, when it starts with wildlife, is about linking with the broader safety and security clusters, identifying those key hotspots in the landscape and the risk management, especially when it comes to risk management, climate change adaptation. The opportunities are better guided once we start to know in the landscape where to focus that and through which partnerships. Governance arrangements are critical, having the same entry points with communities as well as with the public sector. Just a bit of a methodology before we start to look into some of the photos, which we are really proud of, is that we recognize that the protected area network shown in green, the map to the left, is the core of driving the ecosystem services and the economy. But how far do we take these partnerships to maintain that and the livelihoods next to it? The red line next to the protected area network is our immediate communities and protected areas with whom we've got a close relationship, and we need to strengthen it to ensure that we deal with human-wildlife conflict, integrate with economic activities, and expand the conservation estate. The yellow blocks are the traditional authority areas, 39 of them, and within each of those, they've got different chieftaincies. Ultimately, our management focus and where we put our partnerships and teams are from the catchment areas. The Blyde catchment, your Inkumati areas, the Olifant systems, that is ultimately where our protected area management starts, with a map to the right showing the area to the north of the Kruger National Park, bordering Zimbabwe being the Mutele community, Makuya Traditional Authority, Madimbo Corridor. Those are critical areas necessary to be protected to ensure that the river systems are healthy, flowing into the Kruger National Park and ultimately Mozambique. Starting to work in a landscape requires a certain approach and understanding what is unique inside the Kruger National Park and on the outside and working along the system. So understanding our river systems and what we call ecological infrastructure, it's basically supporting environmental ecosystem services to maintain those rivers, unique species, and we start to focus our protected area expansion on that. That's the map to the left. And the map to the right is then where we put the efforts with communities and our protected area partners to protect certain areas shown in red, but having economic viable opportunities in the area. Protected areas are not islands on their own. They need to be economically viable. If you look into the map to the left, darker areas are the more poverty-stricken areas, and your areas in Limpopo province bordering the Kruger National Park has got a very high direct dependency on natural resources. Hence, households still use a lot of wood and direct resources from nature in order to sustain the livelihoods. And those resources are getting depleted, unfortunately, also by commercial entities that is contributing to deforestation. The map in the middle is starting to look, where do we get our employment from? A lot of the protests are linked to who is being employed from which area. So it is critical when we do employ community members that we are able to say where they are being employed from and which processes were followed. The map to the right is just, once again, the climate change considerations. We are dealing with a changing environment. It's impacting on the river systems, agricultural activities, and wildlife, and it needs to be implemented at the operational level, how we deal with communities. Through this process, we are working on 6 key strategic objectives with partners in certain areas of the landscape, working on our natural resources or capital, looking to the protection within protected areas on the outside, but also looking into innovative ways to stimulate economic development linked to the protected area network and communities, mobilizing resources through different platforms to the right areas in a fair and transparent way. But if we don't work with our broader local planning processes, the municipalities and water resource management entities, we cannot protect our assets within the Kruger National Park and downstream in Mozambique. This is therefore about our partnership and institutions that are critical to maintain this iconic flagship protected area network. The first program showing then the map to the right is our cooperative agreement. It's a protected area partnership between the Kruger National Park and 15 state public and community areas bordering the Kruger National Park. The agreement was signed in 2018, and the principle was really about how do we manage the system instead of silos as a collective, that we can start to deal with governance. So are we meeting the same standards to manage this area? What is the socioeconomic contribution also to communities in the area? And where do we need to focus our financial efforts? What can we do together in the conservation management around species of interest, around river systems, and where are additional land that we can expand on? And what is very important about this process, these areas added a further 362,000 hectares to the Kruger National Park, and it might seem small compared to the 2 million hectares. But these partners are critical in that they buffer development pressures on the western boundary, and they are also critical in order to provide economic opportunities as well as to mobilize resources for our wildlife management. It's a partnership that we learn from every day. A lot of improvements still, but a lot of more communities currently underway to be included into this initiative. Our partnerships are also critical, especially for us as state managed areas, to maintain basic management around key species of interest. This then being one of our key functions. Our rhino and elephant management programs are critical for the ecological management of these species, but also to look into safety and security aspects and to mitigate the impacts in adjacent areas. Considering the changes that we are dealing with in the broader landscape and the challenges from a rhino protection perspective is that we are receiving support from our partners. And within this year, we reviewed the Rhino management strategy, which is looking into the proactive approaches, the ecological management. This is a process that's still ongoing and a very challenging situation, but once again, extremely supportive partnerships. Our canine support is also one of our tools, once again supported through our external partners, once again as one of the responses to deal with wildlife crime. And these then also very often our community members being trained by our local partners. We cannot focus only on the sort of hard skills when it comes to protected area management, and that's a celebration of the ranger services also next weekend. It is about the partnership that looks into the development of leadership, this then with WWF and the Wildlife College, what we call the Braveheart training, and it's embedding those principles of leadership also to deal with conflict within a community situation and within a difficult protected area situation and creating a career path. On the western boundary, where we are bordered by our private nature reserves and state managed areas, the Greater Kruger Environmental Protection Forum was established, and they are our critical partners in order to deal with environmental safety and security, not only around rhino populations, but broader technology development and macro solutions, also buffering us then on the western boundary. In the Greater Kruger Cooperative Agreement partnerships, different interventions are then being followed and sustained and also led by the private sector especially, this being then the rhino dehorning, the ecological monitoring around this, and the communication strategies are then key, with this being just one tool in the broader landscape where we need to work together as partners. Without going into detail around species-specific issues, is that our integrated wildlife management cannot and do not start within the Kruger National Park. It is dependent on how we manage risk management zones outside the Kruger National Park, snaring being a major concern, with good partnership with EWT, State Veterinary Services and more, which is also looking into proactive monitoring of these risk zones in addition to the disease management. A key element is then citizenship science, our awareness and engagement with communities, but tourists being critical in reporting these incidents, similar to the lion incident. Our work on the outside with the fence starts with our partnership with State Veterinary Services based here in the Kruger National Park, but also on the outside responsible for the foot and mouth disease zones. And the primary function of the fence was really never intended to keep in wildlife. And it's actually very sad in that it stopped the natural migration routes of animal along the escarpment and the catchment system. It is primarily there about disease control, keeping buffalo and livestock apart, and the implications that it has for the international trade around our meat. The secondary function only is conservation outcomes, in a way trying to prevent that wildlife get in contact with human livelihoods. These then lions that were captured in the Matsulu area bordering the Kruger National Park to the south. This video just was taken recently by our State Veterinary Services.
Good morning. I'm with Punda Maria team working around Lambani area. Now we are replacing one line of fence that was stolen by a local community here. I'm working with the Dongo Ziba team, and the problem here is the small animals like your impalas and the deckers are able to go out, exit the park here. That's why we are closing this area. Thank you.
Our State Veterinary Services are working with teams walking up to 10 to 12 kilometers, and every day they need to patrol this. What we experience in terms of the bush meat trade is very often not only to sustain livelihoods, there's also a very real market around the bush meat trade around the Kruger National Park. Unfortunately, when buffalo get into contact with cattle, it does pose concerns around foot and mouth disease spread. From a resource management program perspective, we are working with our catchment agencies. These are photos then of the Olifant system, which we are monitoring, and some of the tests done at the Mazangiri just before it enters Mozambique, just to once again monitor the algae, and working closely with Mozambique with entities such as Arasul in order to look into the downstream water service quality. The Kruger National Park is bordered by livelihoods, especially agricultural practices. This is one of the gates in the south between the community areas and the Sabi River. It's basically as you enter Kruger Gate. And this is one of the fences along the Sabi River where communities then enter to access pumps in order to irrigate their crops. It is critical for their livelihoods, but it does pose safety and security risks to their own livelihoods with dangerous animals, and safety and security risks at large for us to look into wildlife protection, and then from a veterinary services perspective to make sure that there's no spread of diseases between livestock and buffalo. Once again, this requires relationships with the community structures, with the farmers, and state veterinary services. With our elephant population doing extremely well within the Greater Kruger, we embark with our partners, including WWF, Mozambique, and Zimbabwe, on the development of the GLTFCA elephant management framework and associated wildlife translocation policy. This is very critical for us to deal with issues around we are having a fragmented landscape. Where do we go with the elephants? How do we deal with the policy between 3 countries and with wildlife impacting on adjacent communities, their crops? And what is the opportunity for the private sector also to contribute to translocations broader than elephants only? Looking into the protection of wildlife, we cannot separate that, especially in community areas, from the economic well-being. A set of programs with the partners are then working on the biodiversity economy and agriculture compatible with the land users, waste economy, your ecological infrastructure, and opportunities to create enterprises that will also promote the relationships with a protected area network and between private community and the public sector. This is one of my colleagues, and she's a real champion working in Mpumalanga and Limpopo province. And this is one of our community areas, Shikusheni, here next to the Sabi Sands Voltaine. And what these platforms are is it creates the opportunity for enterprise development linked to the protected area network. But it's not only that. These networks are also responsible to create environmental education and awareness within school, in that they then use it as platform to build a relationship with ranger services and deal with issues around wildlife crime. So it's not limited to waste management awareness only, but it's about creating custodianship in our communities linked to efforts of the protected area network. This was a cleaning up campaign in the past week around the Kruger National Park. This was conducted in all areas. Very often these efforts are led by women within a community group. So we do have then specific programs, especially enabling and supporting women who's carrying this role, as well as our environmental awareness in the community areas. Kruger National Park is changing. We need to look into how can we be more inclusive of community areas. Now, the pink dots to the north are some of the community areas that showed the interest to be included into the Kruger National Park, and we are engaging with them each at the level of the royal family and the traditional council structures to look into opportunity for rangeland management around livestock, land inclusion, and enterprise development. But we are not only focusing on these areas. This is a partnership through EWT, which is then our Endangered Wildlife Trust, which is then working further away from the Kruger National Park on the Soutpansberg Stewardship Initiative. And it's in essence starting to protect areas with wildlife and unique biodiversity of plants to secure these water systems that ultimately flow into the Kruger National Park. One of the other projects that we are working on as a team especially, and I spend a lot of my time up there, is Kujana and Bavula. It's an area where the star is shown to the north. And the interest of this area, although it's only 3,000 hectares in total, is really to look into economies that's compatible with the Kruger National Park, looking into wildlife management, infrastructure development, but also our livestock management. This is then a photo shown, the one at the top. We had a range of meetings with the livestock farmers. Unless we work with the livestock farmers, because that's the primary livelihood. And in this area, we've got 664 cattle only in this village. We are not going to be able to work on the wildlife economy. Hence, how do we start to protect our areas? Issues that we need to discuss is the disease management, herding practices, improve rangeland management, and market access, considering it falls within a foot and mouth disease area with limited economic opportunities. We worked in this community almost for 2 years to build this cohesion. It's an ongoing process, and we are very proud of this partnership. We are also very proud of our partnership. Aubrey Makuleke is in the audience tonight with the Makuleke Management Plan. The Makuleke Contractual Park is to the north, bordering Mozambique and Zimbabwe. And it's a beautiful area with a Ramsar wetland site, the sense of wilderness, but it's also facing the unique challenges from a wildlife safety and security, limited access in terms of air and road access. We are therefore very fortunate to have an extremely capable team with Aubrey as well, that is now looking into the lessons learned since the late 1990s, when the agreement was signed with the Makuleke Contractual Park, and really reflecting what do we need to do now in the next few months, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, to sustain this area for its unique wilderness areas, its wetlands, but also how we deal with issues around wildlife safety and security and community socioeconomic development. The process then especially is looking into responsible tourism opportunities with Zimbabwe and Mozambique and adjacent communities, bringing it into the planning processes of the GLTFCA, recognizing the cultural heritage, but also that the socioeconomic development opportunities need to be linked to the Kruger National Park and adjacent products that are complementary to each other. The biodiversity management is critical then to look into our river systems, and the stakeholder relationship is once again the central glue to deal with the issues. The photo to the left is our coordinator for this project, Dr. Kira Skuman, who's currently facilitating the process with Aubrey, also with the Makuleke CPA. And the photo to the right is whether it's cold weather or warm weather, we are having our meetings and discussing how to take the management forward of this area, this then with the Makuleke Contractual Park Joint Management Committee, which includes the concessions, community members, and our ranger services. A program that I'm very proud of also with our partners from the National Department, SANB, Peace Parks Foundation, WWF, and the Wildlife College, Sustento, is really to work in clusters where we especially experience impacts on rhino poaching, elephant poaching, and high poverty indexes. And the aim is really to strengthen the institutions within community structures to deal with illegal wildlife trade as the first line of defense. This is then one of the photos. We are working with our community liaison programs, supported by our partnerships, that is improving communication, a sense of understanding, and understanding the perceptions of communities towards the protected area network. A lot of planning, then also the photo below, as to how we include community structures into the economic and conservation practices. This is always done with ranger services and our liaison officers. The program is also supporting our state veterinary services in their huge task in maintaining the fence next to the Kruger National Park. and our environmental monitor team, who has been appointed basically as game scouts to support our state veterinary services, to build relationships with the communities, but also to assist with protected area management. This was a photo that was taken this week, where our environmental monitor team and supervisors appointed to oversee the program reported on the snare. This was put out for a civet. Where previously this information was not reported, we are now getting inputs and support through our environmental monitors or game scouts, and in other areas, it's called the Black Mambas or the Pride Group. We also put a lot of effort into our environmental monitors to meet with them on a monthly basis and to better understand some of the challenges. And the reality is that these youth are very often facing very difficult situations where they are threatened, their lives are really being impacted on, or where they encounter dangerous animals. They are not equipped with weapons. They patrol the areas on the outside of the Kruger National Park, and they need to deal with challenging situations, including protests. Part of our program was then also to equip them with bicycles. Some of them need to walk up to 10 kilometers in order just to get to work, and they patrol areas between 5 to 12 kilometers, helping to maintain the fence and engage with our ranger services. They were also then handed out equipment to assist with the fixing of the fences, once again supported by our state veterinary services in the training as to how to use the equipment, and our liaison officers and ranger services being part of the partnership team. This is a photo of our regional ranger, our community liaison officer and socioeconomic transformation officer who's part of the team. We have a lot of engagement with the traditional authority structure and the youth structures, and it is about developing custodianship, but also dealing with issues around the illegal wildlife trade, issues around discipline and personal mastery within these different community structures. The photo to the left is one of my section ranger colleagues when we had a training session with the environmental monitors, explaining what is being expected for reporting to the ranger services, because it is the aspirations of many of the community members to become section rangers. But we also deal with different programs around the community engagement. And this is a program with one of our partnerships, looking to the restorative justice, which is basically looking into how collectively do we get the offender and the victim together, and what are the measures to be taken in order to prevent that the similar situation then happens again. This is being piloted in areas south to the Kruger National Park as part of this program. Through our partnership with the Wildlife College and Peace Parks Foundation and Sustento, our youth structures are also being trained not only to do their work, but as part of the personal mastery and to deal with very difficult situations. They also then receive training to deal with issues around poisoning incidents, mapping of areas, and issues around ranger discipline. Some of the photos shown in the south of the park for the community areas then show our state veterinary services. Once again, that we engage with, they very often deal with the interface between livestock, cattle, but we also use programs around the waste management then to reach out, especially to communities, to deal with issues around illegal wildlife crime. The video to the left was sent to me today. It is dealing with snaring that we previously did not get reports from, and I'm going to play the video now.
Hi, under GF6 stewardship program, this is one of the challenges that we're facing with the local communities, putting snares along the fence. This incident happened in the central cluster along the Sabi River in the Kruger National Park.
Through reporting this timeously, we could then address the situation. Our early childhood development, and this is our school here in Skakuza, is also critical already to instill the love for nature and an understanding of what we do here in the Kruger National Park, this then being the children of our staff. Our partners, especially the NGOs and private partners, are working with us in programs around enterprise development, the Kruger Tucanian from the region for the region initiative, as well as value add through the processing of wildlife as well as livestock products. I was told I need to rush, so I'm going to rush. Our colleagues are also working on the management planning of the Kruger National Park with local government. The map to the right shows all the development applications that we had to deal with recently. So it's a mammoth task to make sure that this is compatible economically and conservation with the Kruger National Park. We then give inputs through the environmental processes, also into the local planning processes of the municipalities. So through these partnerships, starting with the GLTFCA to the local level, we engage with the community forums in a structured way, especially around the human-wildlife conflict, with the traditional authorities in both Mpumalanga and Limpopo province through structured processes, but also the land claimant group in Kruger National Park, where land claims of 26.6% of the park has been raised. Our safety and security clusters work closely with the private sector at GKIP and the provincial safety and security clusters on the outside and the stock theft unit. And we continuously need to engage with 9 local municipal LED and SDF structures. Our rays of hope in the landscape is our biospheres, the Wembe biosphere to the north, through their youth network and programs, which is once again critical in our relationships. Their community projects bordering the Kruger National Park and Mutele, also looking into human-wildlife conflict, and our Kruger Tucanian biosphere straddling the center of the park, from the Blyde Canyon, including the Olifants and Sabi River systems. They've been a critical partner in developing these partnerships through the Global Environmental Facility Protected Area Program, our water stewardship programs. Starting to end with my presentation, we need to be able to look into the economic impact of the protected areas, how tourism, protected area management, hunting, and social investment contribute to the GDP, to beneficiation, and through the impact of COVID, this is a critical exercise that we will review. Our financial approach and community approaches and inclusion is therefore dependent on that. And the business case really follows key principles around multi-criteria for conservation, economic investment, and working towards the investor conference to have these areas included in a responsible way. So just to conclude, it is a challenging environment, but if we've got the collective vision and we are moving in the same direction, incrementally we can make changes. It is important to put the principles for collaboration up front. It's not only about the management within Kruger National Park, it is how we work with our partners on the outside. It requires a day in, day out relationships on a continuous operational level. Political champions are critical, extensive planning, and how we work from the community level to our private and community reserves. There needs to be a unity of purpose between the spheres of government. It requires constant engagement, confirming that. The central infrastructure of the Kruger National Park and our Gate Hub developments are critical catalysts in enterprise development and community-private partnerships. The value of a single brand is critical for us going forward and to crowd in public investment. Critical also is to build a confidence for a platform for private sector investment and to maintain the momentum incrementally. It doesn't need to be big, but if we start on small programs, success breeds success until we can have that regional impact. Our local partnership and support has been critical for the point where we are now and going forward. Some fun slides, and there's 3 of them. This is not possible without team cohesion and knowledge transfer. We recognize our partners, this in the Makuya Nature Reserve, our state veterinary partners, who's working on this collective dream to maintain these beautiful landscapes, but to build community relationships on a daily basis. We do extensive planning, we sit around maps, we discuss what works, what doesn't work, but we get time to see beautiful places in the process and also have some fun in between, this being then with the young ones in my team. This is then the key team, not limited to them, that is driving this process from different NGO partners. And I thank them also for their commitment for the communities, for the Kruger Protected Area Network, and building the relationships. So looking at the landscape of the Kruger National Park, it's much more than the wonderful wildlife and the rivers that we've got. It's much more than the challenges. It is about celebrating the inspiring partnerships that we do have. And it's about bringing the environmental and the economic aspects together in order to support this landscape for the future. Thanks so much for this opportunity. I started this presentation being extremely nervous.
Thanks for a very inspirational talk. There's a lot of strings that need to be held together. And so it is hard work and courageous work. And I'm particularly excited about the focus on the water catchment areas. As Chris alluded to, one of the projects that we've been lucky enough to be involved in, Parc National du Banku in West Africa, in Côte d'Ivoire, we're actually facing the same challenges, well, as Chris mentioned, just at a different scale. And protection of the watercourse and the water catchment area is also critical amongst all the other critical factors. And I just wondered what kind of cooperation you're getting from the local water authorities, and perhaps who is the most proactive at the moment on that western boundary from a water authority point of view.
Thanks, Neil. Can I respond, Chris?
Yes, please, Marissa.
All right, thanks. I'm going to respond, and I'm going to ask my partners, Maritinka, to join in. We've got a program that is led by Dr. Eddie Riddell, who is our water resource managers. And he's working especially with the Inkumati Usutu Catchment Management Agency. So they are our critical partners dealing with the Sabi River system, with the Crocodile River system, and being instrumental with our programs then for the areas straddling the Kruger-Tucanian biosphere. In terms of our collaboration with the legislated company or entity, Department of Water and Sanitation, they do face huge capacity issues. There is a process underway looking into the assignment of new water use areas. Once again, Sandparks is a critical driver in terms of the expertise around that, but we are also supported by NGO partners, being the Kruger-Tucanian Biosphere, who's then also implementing some of our water stewardship programs with WWF, with the South African National Biodiversity Institute. For areas further north, our water committee structures, especially with the community, sadly, are not very functional. So that is a major constraint. And then with our transboundary collaboration, it is working also with NGO partners such as USAID Resilient Waters, around the downstream service delivery with entities such as Limcom and Arasul. A major concern in the catchment is that a lot of the water allocation is also allocated to other catchment areas. So we do have the catchment management agencies. We are much more nimble to respond to water planning issues with NGO partners, then also looking specifically into the livelihood aspects. Neil, so that's in a nutshell, and I'm not sure, Maritinka, who's part of this audience, if you would also like to respond.
Well, I don't have much to add, Marissa. You have summarized it all so well. It's a mammoth task, and the leadership from Kruger, especially also then also from Marisa and her team, which includes Dr. Adele, is very important to all of us.
Thank you very much, Marie and Marissa and Neil, for your question. Next up, Marty, your hand is up. The screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Marita, for the talk and for all your absolute hard work that you do and the efforts that you make. Part of me feels quite desperate when I look at the picture that's painted, and in a way, the massive area, almost double the size of Kruger, that you need to try and manage from within Kruger. And I mean, I think without making this a whole political discussion, the elephant in the room is, as you said in that point 4, is political will and political buy-in. And how I don't know, how do we get it better? How do we do it better to win that that side of things?
Thanks, Ruan. Sorry, I couldn't get the name.
Marty.
Sorry?
Marty Jasper.
Marty. I think, Marty, the first step towards being able to do something is to acknowledge that there are challenges and that one is dealing with a very fast changing environment, ecologically, socioeconomically. And I think once one starts to embrace that, you could start to do something about it. And I think once again, with the partnerships, it makes a major difference. The political buy-in is critical. I don't think there's ever a once-off that you can ensure that you've got the political buy-in, because political leadership is changing. It's constantly, whether it's local elections or at the national level. We were very fortunate with the consultations around the Kruger management plan process in 2017 and 18, in that we consulted broadly, as I mentioned, with 54 workshops and metros and local areas. And it was quite apparent that it's very polarized. What community members and protected areas bordering the Kruger National Park experience and what they want is very different from what entities and metros want and believe that needs to be done. We then had the opportunities to raise it through our processes to the political structures, which then resulted in the instruction to develop the greater Kruger Strategic Development Program through the minister. It was taken through all the political processes. It was recently approved at Cabinet with the Mpumalanga province, simply because it is actually so logical that one needs to work in some key focal areas to maintain a flagship national park and economic driver. Similar processes are underway with the Limpopo department. But in the end, the difference is going to be made through the relationships at the grassroots level. How do we engage with the communities on a day in, day out basis? Because they are also very much linked to the political structures. For the Kruger National Park, we've got the employment around 2,500 people in the Kruger National Park. On the outside, we've got a small team, not more than almost 25 working on the outside. And this is where our partnerships and their advocacy and role does become very critical at the political level, but the relationship level as well. And we take it day by day and focus on the areas which is most critical and we can make a difference in terms of perceptions. So we do see it as a positive journey going forward.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marissa. Marty, I'm just going to unmute you. Anything else? Any other comments?
Just to say thank you for your answer, and we are actually behind you, and we wish you all the best and wish we could do more.
Thanks so much, Marty.
Thank you, Marty. And anyone else? Just wave your hands, get up, jump up. Any other questions? Marissa,
Cheryl Ogilvie is quiet. What's that, Cheryl?
You could see I've been thinking on this because my PhD was also on the socioeconomics of a community that was surrounded in Dumu Game Reserve. And Marissa, I know exactly what you're going through to a certain degree and the politics behind it. But I wanted to ask you, any skills training that's going out there in the community, like vegetable gardening, to enhance the socioeconomics? And the second question was also, do you have any kind of programs like Eco Warrior programs, which is building the youth? It can also be linked to the FEE program, or that's the Foundation for Environmental Education, where they actually look at building the youth up and solving environmental issues, like you were talking about the Pampers going through into the park as well. Sorry, my brain was working double the time again.
Thanks so much, Cheryl. I'll definitely then make use of your brain if you've got double the brain. Cheryl, yeah, what is very important is our environmental education for sustainability. That's why the Early Childhood Development Program, just to start with that, in the Kruger National Park is so critical. Our first client and first stakeholder is our staff, because they come from the adjacent communities. And that's foundational. Our relationships with the private nature reserve and NGOs are critical in the role that they fulfill within this. The Kruger to Canyon biosphere, and once again, the Wembe biosphere, their niche area is really to look into environmental education for sustainability. Maritinga, to me, is the leader. She's been in the landscape, I think, longer than the landscape itself. But with the partnership with the NGOs, which is looking then into building personal mastery, confidence in different use structures. They've got the group Pride group, and they've got around 220 environmental monitors. And it's about developing skills, confidence, and a career path within the field of environmental education. Our environmental monitor program that I presented now is made possible through the partnership with Peace Parks Foundation, Nita Verhoef on the line, and the Wildlife College. And the purpose of that is really to look into environmental scouts or environmental monitors with the purpose of a section ranger career pathing. But the local community liaison officers are also looking into how do we deal with conflict resolutions within communities, because they're the first people that's being either threatened by the traditional authorities if something is being reported. Our partnership with WWF through the Ikita program is then also investing in that. We are focusing pilots around areas in the South Matsulu area with a high level of rhino poaching, as well as poverty around the broader Sabi River system, around the access use, working with a private nature reserve, and then up north, the broader Matsulu. So it's different cultures, but partnering with the K2C and the Wembe into developing these environmental monitors or scouts, but also foundational with our early childhood development program. What is very important is to document this initiative because it changes daily. Coming to your point on the agribusiness and the enterprise development, we have conducted programs, once again, with the Kruger to Canyons and WWF around water stewardship for those farms. The photo that I showed of the cropping areas bordering the Kruger, which is then looking into market access, national as well as international market access, and the incentives then through the protected areas for that market access. Training, working with the Department of Agriculture, and it's also about regulating access into the Kruger National Park through those gates. What we found is that a program can really do well for 2 years, and you work through the institutional structures. And then it might tap at a certain point of time if there's a power shift or dimension shift within a community structure. So you need to work at multiple levels, at the cooperatives, at your catchment management agencies, and the agriculture. Our private partners and the NGOs are once again important. They are very nimble in being able to mobilize funding, training. So we do have some of those partnerships to the south of the Kruger National Park, once again to the north with the Wembe biosphere and Kruger to Canyon. And it's about basic things around food security and access to markets. A new program that we will embark on is through GIZ, is to look under the COVID funding, how more of these community areas can be supported, linked to the NGO network. So we really look forward to learn from other experiences, considering that we are now embarking with these programs as well. But once again, Maritinka and my colleagues, please join and add anything that I might have missed out.
Maritinka, I am unmuting you if you want to add anything to that. Thank you very much, Marissa and Cheryl, for the question.
Yeah, I think somebody of the team can also talk to this. You know, there's a couple of us, but just to endorse what Marissa is saying, you know, it needs to be a collective effort, and the support from all sides needs to become to the fore. And I think this is a leadership webinar, and this is just to demonstrate to the world as well how leadership like Marissa's is really having a galvanizing effect in landscapes next to Kruger.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Is there anyone, Maritinka, from the team that you would like me to unmute? To anyone you would like to identify there? We don't know.
Maybe Benke can just say a couple of words if you have time, Benke.
Benke, I'm going to ask you to unmute now. There we go.
Thanks, Ruan, and thanks, Maritinka. I'm very much the junior here, learning from these very powerful women, and I feel that it is a great privilege. So I don't have much to add, other than at the end of the day, it's about partnership, and I think the coming together of the NGO sector, the communities, and people like Sandbox and local government even, you know, it's incredible to see this interaction in the landscape and the willingness to work towards a greater good.
Ruan, I'm going to put on the spot. I see Nita and Craig is also here, Spencer. They can very much also share their experiences.
For those of you, please, you can unmute yourself at this moment. I need not ask you anymore. So please just unmute yourself and then you can please add to that.
I see Craig is unmuted. Come on, Craig.
And Nita is out at the moment, so
come on, Craig, you can do it.
Yeah, Craig doesn't need a lot of encouragement.
You can unmute yourself. You can add. Your hand was up now.
Yeah, Chris, I think that this talk, Marissa, it's been phenomenal, this talk, because we've heard of 2 conservation areas tonight. So share screen is essentially started in this very presentation, because we've had 2 conversations tonight. We're looking at the greater Kruger landscape. Dr. Ogilvy's thrown in her 50 cents worth with regards to the Ndumo community. And I think the big challenge to the leadership for conservation in Africa is, what are we doing to ensure that this is the type of approach that is being handled for all conservation projects across the African continent? Just a comment.
Well, luckily we have the CEO of the LCA with us.
Well, if you say the leadership of conservation in Africa, what we do, we have 1.5 full-time employees. We can make it 2. Alistair, it is just so vital, you know, and if we do not start creating this awareness at every possible level, whether it's at student level, whether it's ECD level for that side. I mean, I will never forget that we were at the World Parks Congress in Sydney, and one of the speakers, I don't want to give the name now simply because it's not appropriate in terms of our situation, but one of the speakers, I can say it straight out, the chairman of our board, stood up at the World Park conference, which happens once in 10 years, and said, if you do not, as conservationists, spend 50% of your time within the context of the local communities. And out of that, spend another 50% of your time on awareness and those relationships. We did. You can go bigger fences and bigger guns. We did. And that's the point. You know, we have to share this knowledge and expertise. And I mean, Marissa, you and your team, the point is there's so much to learn. And this is the type of thing that we want to share in classrooms everywhere and learn also from each other. Exactly what happened here with Cheryl coming in also from the Ndumu perspective. So there's a challenge and we shall not run away from it. And Marissa, I mean it. I mean, I really, I was actually I started the first four around Kruger Park. And I can tell you, I went into those communities, and I'm saying it in respect to everybody here, because it's a physical reaction. But I had, most of the time, I was living with diarrhea because of stress, going in there, trying to sort out, working with these people. It takes a special type of person also. Let's say that out. It's not the run of the mill. It takes really a special type of person like Marissa and her team to go in there and do these things. But you're right, Alistair. It's not their job, it's our job. And also, you know, for instance, now Saturday, on Saturday afternoon, when you have the talk with the rangers, it's initiated by the honorary rangers in collaboration with Sandparks. Honorary rangers being private people, but they are doing something, and that's vital. You know, it's all of us. It's not just one. But anyway, I'm giving a hell of a sermon here. My apologies. Somebody help me, please, so I can keep quiet.
There are no questions in the chat section, Chris and Marissa, but I just would like to read a good friend of mine, an old student buddy of mine, Dr. Mengu Mbele. She's a medical doctor now. She says, emphasis on partnership. I've also seen that when people feel like they are part of something great, they tend to take pride in protecting and taking very good care of it. So just one of the very many thank yous, and thank you for the great work and brilliant presentations all around. Cheers and congratulations in the chat section. Anyone else with your hands up? Any other comments? It need not be a question. It could be a thank you. It could be a good luck. Anything. You are more than welcome to share your feelings and opinions. Please.
Thanks, Ruan. Just from my side, when Chris mentioned it takes a special person, but everyone needs to be involved. And my career started as a zoologist, and I ended up working with people. And I think the person that changed the most was myself. And I think it's happening on a daily basis. And I think that this is what is required in terms of protected areas. We can think about wonderful wildlife and landscapes, but unless you start to equip yourself and is willing to change in order to keep up with a changing environment and is willing to change, there's not going to be wildlife. And the person that changed the most in this process, and that's learning daily, is myself. And once again, it's through platforms like this, through partnerships, through hard lessons every day. So just once again, thanks from my side for the opportunity at this platform.
Thank you, Marissa. Ruan, it seems to me you ended with that lovely message about the relationships. I thank you, Marissa, and I know it takes courage, and courage to keep on having the hope and creating that enthusiasm. And that's, I can just say, well done. And to the broader community and Kruger and everyone involved. Thanks to all of you. Remind you of next week, Dave de Beer on the southern right whale. And I think we should talk again, Marissa, maybe we can open other doors. But thank you to everybody who was in tonight for your interest, for your support. And we wish you a lovely evening and a good morning for those of you who are on the other side of the equator. Maret, yeah, there's just a round of applause there. So now if you want to say hi to mommy or my little sister or whatever, you're welcome to do so. I'm not going to cut you all off. It's just a family talk for everyone who wants in.
I don't know if Janssen Davies is still on. I'd like to hear him or Andrew Patterson give their comments.
Where's Janssen? He was still here just now. I think he just dropped out. I saw him a minute ago. And Ritania, yeah, you can unmute yourself and just come in. Anyway, Marty, Jasper, what is unlocking nature talk without Marty in here asking some brilliant questions? I'm sure you studied the whole week to ask those very good questions.
Chris, I think the key here, and I think you touched on it just now as well, but I mean, Dr. Kutsia definitely touched on it. The key is ultimately that you study to be a zoologist, a botanist, a conservationist. You want to play in the field of dealing with animals and run away from human beings as a general sort of contact point. And we spend our lives dealing with humans to protect something that we love. And I think that the information that we're getting out of this type of talk and everything that we generally discuss in the LCA is that we're spending more time becoming social scientists and dealing with the social issues around our conservation areas. And for any prospective conservation or zoologist or conservationist, zoologist, botanist, if all the TUT students or any of the TUT students are still around, it ultimately comes down to the fact that we're dealing with social science, and you need to be able to engage with the people element, because if you're not going to engage with that people element, we're not going to achieve what we set out to do.
Exactly. It's what it is. It's just how it is. It's no longer, and I'm sorry to say that, it's no longer when you study zoology or you become a junior ranger or a guide in Kruger, 30 and 40 years ago, they all aspired to shoot their first elephant. That's what it was about. It's like you fly solo the day you've shot your first elephant. Those days are over. It's absolutely over. That's not what it's about anymore. I'm sorry. This is what it is. Anyway, Johan Kruger, would you like to say something? Unmute yourself and come in and say hi. Johan works behind the scenes, and he's also the overall coordinator of Share Screen Africa. Johan Kruger.
Good evening, everybody. It's good to see you all. And it was a fascinating conversation tonight. And I agree with Chris, the times have changed forever, unfortunately, or fortunately. And we are adapting and learning as we go, creating a new reality.
Exactly. Thanks, Johan. He's quite a nice looking guy, but he doesn't want to switch on his camera, so it's okay.
For that, right. Earlier today on his screen.
The golden rule is if we're down to one screen, we switch off. Craig Spencer, I'm sure he's taking a smoke out there at the moment.
Probably is, Craig.
He's smoking his pipe.
Chris, I'm noticing, sorry, I can't get my hand up, but I see my colleague Elna de Beer from the Wildlife College, who's part of our partner programs, and she's a true social ecologist. So I'm learning constantly from her. I wonder if she would like to add some of her experiences.
She can unmute herself, but I'm asking her now to unmute. Hello, Elna de Beer.
Hello, everybody. It's as a social scientist listening to conservationists, it is a breath of fresh air blowing through the through conservation nowadays, I'm really, really encouraged and really inspired by some of the insights. Coming back to what Marissa has said, I think one of the key success factors for me in the partnership program is, first of all, amazing visionary leadership from a person like Marissa. And this is not just patting each other on the back, because we had our own skirmishes as well in the program. But I think the one critical thing for me, as being one of the partners, one of the more peripheral partners in the program, is also to get an understanding that that you're not being taken over by a program. You can start seeing and understanding your role and contribution in the program. Because I think quite a lot of time, especially in landscape-based programs such as the Greater Kruger program that is being driven here by quite a number of people under leadership of Marissa, is that there's quite a lot of resistance sometimes, especially in the beginning, when, because most people, most of us are quite territorial about our functions and our roles and responsibilities. And it's quite important to understand and, to start feeling your space and your place in the program. And once that can be harnessed, that's when groups really start gelling, that people don't feel, sort of what I always call the territorial imperative, where we almost fight for our positions. And this is not happening in this particular space. So I think that's the one part. I think that's a critical success factor that Marissa unlocked really with great effectiveness in the process, in getting a lot of people to start working together and to start focusing in the same direction and entry points, etc. The other thing that I maybe also just would like to leave with the group here is one of the things from, because I'm with the Wildlife College, and particularly from a skills development and a training perspective, is also a priority focus to enable capacity in teams and the people who's actually on the ground. Particularly in the Jeff 6 program, there's key focuses on the people on the ground, the frontline staff, and the environmental monitors that Marissa is talking about in here. So it's not just driving a process, but I don't know if Maritinka is still on the line or on the call. The whole aspect of social learning and enabling people who's at the forefront of, the guy who's walking the fence, facing the community, the community liaison officers, the youth championship, the youth champions, really to enable those people with a capacity to participate effectively in programs. Because quite a lot of time, these things are quite a lot of words, and we seem to be doing a lot of things. But what I've seen with this particular program, I think we're only about 2 years into the program, it is just minds coming together and really, and it's not perfect. No, it's by no means perfect, but I think it's the gentleness of the walk that Marissa is enabling in all of us to really, hopefully, fully collaborate in the process and work towards the greater good of what this is all about in the end. And that is, making sure that people are safe as part of our social ecological systems. Sorry, I want to go off on a tangent now, so I'm going to keep my peace. Thank you very much for the call, Marissa. And I was I'm very proud of being part of your team. Thank you very much for that. Thanks everybody for listening.
Thank you, Elna de Beer. I had one, I listened to what you said, and the whole idea of minds coming together where you actually take away the territory. One mind is then one focus. Are women better at this than men?
Chris, kan julle my hoor?
100%.
Dis Craig Spencer wat nou wakker geword het.
How's it, Ruan? Hello, Chris. Hello, Marissa, and everybody else. Venka and K2C guys. And Valeria as well is online, which is very nice. I'm sorry, my microphone was giving me trouble earlier, which is why I couldn't contribute when I wanted to, but now I've plugged in an external mic so I can do a karaoke, if that would please you. Otherwise, I just wanted to say, Marissa, you know, every time I listen to you speak, it's a inspiration. I think that we should put you on the road and take you around, because what people really need to realize, you know, if you put things into context, this multi-ownership model of the greater Kruger National Park really captures maybe 3% of the South African land mass, and this it could be seen as a kind of Swiss bank account for our big five. And the Kruger Park has got such goodwill, you know, if you look at it in a business context, of 100+ years that accommodates so many different user groups and has done so incredibly well. You know, if you just go across the border into Mozambique and you compare you know, strategies and what have you, who has actually triumphed? So, you know, what I'm trying to say is that despite, you know, all the negative pictures that you see of rhinos being slaughtered and snares being set and so on, those are massive challenges that everybody is facing. But at the same time, there's a huge movement of NGOs, of you know, people on the South African landscape that have been mobilized, people in the Northern Hemisphere that have been mobilized and what have you, after 100 years of goodwill that the Kruger Park has built up to build environmental patriots. And, you know, somebody asked a question earlier about the education programs and food security and what have you in the communities. I think we've got to try and put things into context there again and say, you've got a national park system with the Department of Environmental Affairs and the provincial authorities and what have you that have a core function. It's sometimes a little bit unfair of us to ask of them to deviate from their core function and start placing focus on other areas, whereas you know, because to the detriment potentially of their core function. Let us embrace the work that K2C is doing, the extended public works opportunities that have been offered to us, you know, the NGO input and what have you. Let's strengthen those existing initiatives. But in the same breath, you know, Chris, you touched on something that was quite critical. There was a time, an era, and we have to be able to adapt and adjust to the changing socio-political and socio-economic pressures that we find these national parks under. You know, and even in our recruitment policies and so on, we can't be saying that this is the primary skill set we need, you know, and we send you home and that's the message that you're taking back to your community and what have you. You mentioned the guy coming in and you know, to be a member of the club is like the chicken crossing the road. You know, if you make it to the other side, then you're a member of the club. You know, if it was to shoot an elephant or what have you to become a member of the club, that is no longer appropriate. We must recognize that we are under public scrutiny globally. We're part of a global community now. But Marissa, you know, this was, I've skipped many of these talks, but if somebody offers the opportunity to listen to one of your presentations, they would be very silly not to cancel all their appointments to make sure that they are here. This is something that's very, very close to our hearts and something that I think most of the people that have hooked up today, and especially our program with the Black Mambas and the Bush Babies and so on, is striving desperately hard to try and help you to achieve your objectives. So yeah, it's very heartening to see that we tick off a lot of those blocks. So thanks very much for that, Chris, Ruan, and the organizers. Lady dum. No moet ek my pyp gaan rook.
Thank you, Craig. Go and smoke your pipe. Andrew Patterson, it looks like you want to come in, or Lynn Keith. And then after them, I'm going to call it a day because our golden rule is down to one screen, then we call it a day.
After Andrew, I need a question, please, Chris.
Maria, why didn't I know that? Andrew.
Hi, good evening. Thanks very much, Marissa. Before I ask Marissa the question, I was on another Zoom call with the states, time differences, etc., and I missed a little bit of the presentation, so apologies at first. Was there any coverage of the this new concept of restorative justice in applying it to conservation and in terms of winning the hearts and minds of the communities? Was that covered in the presentation at all? Anybody?
Andrew, thanks so much. I'm just quickly going to respond, sadly only in one slide, but I definitely recommend my partner to be invited. As part of our partnership program with WWF Keta, our EW partnership, also supported through USAID, is focusing on pilot areas, especially to the south of Matsulu traditional authorities, bordering the Matluli area around the Sabi Sands, Wildtuin. And part of that specific pilot study is then to look into restorative justice, where they then can collectively identify with the victim as well as the offender, the harms, the needs, the obligations, and what those joint accountabilities are. They are working closely with our traditional authority structures. They got endorsement. It was also facilitated through our socioeconomic transformation offices. They have looked into several case studies, even from hunting of dogs to children that has been arrested also for doing that. We are looking into further case studies, especially towards the north of the Kruger National Park, also to deal with the issues around the human-wildlife conflict issues and elephant. So I would definitely recommend that you get in touch also with our colleagues from EWT, who is definitely operating in this space, looking at those pilot studies, and very happy that we can share that.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, as I said, my question was, I wanted to just make sure that wasn't covered already before I asked the question. That would be a bit silly. But maybe, there's an excellent paper by Annette Hoopler along with EWT on this. So it's basically for the rest of us, if you don't know what this is all about, and Marissa, please correct me when I describe this wrong. It's essentially the Truth and Reconciliation Commission principles being applied into the conservation and the environmental world in communities surrounding reserves, where it's about winning the hearts and minds of the population. There's probably a better way of putting that. Marissa, if you wouldn't mind just giving a brief overview of what it's all about.
Yeah, Andrew, it's definitely looking at a softer approach, dealing with and with the traditional authorities and communities to deal with the issues. I'm just going to read you the definition from the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, and it's not because I'm so great that I've got it ready here. It's the EWT slide. It is actually working with Annette Hoopler and with WWF Keta. It's part of the same team. The definition is it's an approach to justice that aims to involve the parties to a dispute and others affected by the harm, such as the victim, the offender, the communities, etc., and collectively identifying harms, needs, and obligations through accepting responsibilities, making restitution, and taking measures to prevent a recurrence of the incident and promoting reconciliation. So we are definitely looking at this, but also with our typical justice system as to how this could be embedded. A lot of engagement has been with our traditional authority leadership also to get the endorsement support, because this is where the custodianship starts, also with our youth networks and syndicates. The pilot study then with EWT, WWF Keta, and with Annette Hoopler is also linked to community perceptions around protected areas. And this is currently being workshopped. There is a paper also on its way around this. But to be very sincere, we are still learning along the way, and I'm very happy to learn from other similar experiences in other areas.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Marty, last question. And then we call it.
Great.
Then we call it a day.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, again, I mean, not wanting to over politicize the thing, but I think, I mean, on one level, is this not about Maslow's hierarchy of needs? And I know it's a simple model, but until such time as people's lower level needs, such as security and food and those sorts of needs are met, the needs, or not the higher needs of self-actualization and almost looking at conservation and wildlife are only important at those higher needs? Is that not the problem? And that's where it is a political problem, because often those lower needs are actually meant to be delivered by the political system. I hope I'm not flogging a dead horse, but I think that's, how do we actually make this an important political issue to the political parties, that if they do not deliver on that level, that they will no longer be in power. I hope that's making sense.
You wanna go for it, Marissa?
I wanted to say I'll get Marty on my team and we'll walk the walk and learn a lot and do it as a collective. Marty, in the one hand, it's exactly that. I think for very long, protected areas has managed protected areas with their back to the world on the outside. So you face inwards, and everything and anything that's happening on the outside is behind you. And what we actually need to do is to manage from the outside inwards. Unless you start to build trust and start to look in the basic livelihood needs, you cannot expect communities to look into the wildlife security if the basic needs are not being met. And I think this is our conservation. It's changing our own minds first. If we want to try to change at the political level those minds, we need to change it ourselves, and we need to be sincere and walk the talk. So before we get to the high levels, we're trying to lobby at all of the levels, but we need to change. And this is the small steps with our partners that we start to demonstrate it. The voice needs to come from the bottom upwards, from the community members. We can lobby at the political level, and we should. But unless it's coming from the communities themselves, feeling it, owning it, and being part in a very meaningful way, the political level is going to be empty and meaningless. So it does require intervention and the right people at the different tiers to constantly walk this. And I think also that's where sometimes strategy people come up with a program and a strategy, and I sort of cringe. It's a job that's never done. It's a job that you constantly need to win the hearts of people, have the credibility, integrity, but being able to speak the political speak. Are we there yet? No, but I don't think it's a task just concluded. And I think it was mentioned earlier, unless we all become custodians and start to communicate this, we're not going to make big progress. And within the past 4 or 5 years, I've seen how people start to work in the same direction and the vision. And we do differ and we fight with each other. But I do believe in the small wins in order to reach the political level as well.